Hello creeps! Andy here, and I just did a video where I did the overhyped, underhyped, appropriately hyped horror books, and I was thinking last night, I was like, I wonder if I could do this with thriller books, because I did have fun going through all of the books that I've read and on my lists and stuff and finding the books. So that's what I have for you today. So hopefully it's okay that I'm giving you two of basically the same books in a row, videos in a row. I don't know, I just found it really interesting. I also really enjoy your guys' comments when you agree or disagree with me. It's so interesting to see how differently we interpret art. I just think it's fantastic. So anyways, today I'm going to be doing the same thing. I'm going to be talking about thriller books that I think are overhyped, underhyped, and appropriately hyped. Again, if you haven't watched that last video, this isn't to be rude or mean to the authors at all. You know, even if I talk negatively about a book, somebody might find the premise interesting and purchase the book, and it may be perfect for them. I just wanted to be clear that I'm never talking badly about something that somebody worked so hardly on. I really do appreciate every book that I've read, even if it wasn't a book for me. You know, it still gave me something in some way. Anyways, I want to know what thrillers you think are overhyped, underhyped, and appropriately hyped. Feel free to leave them down below, as well as your comments either agreeing or disagreeing with me on whatever books. It's always an interesting comment section with you guys. But let's talk thrillers, because I gotta tell you, I would say that out of all of the genres of books that I read, thriller books are the ones that constantly let me down. I would say a solid 7 out of 10 thrillers I just don't enjoy that much. I find them extremely predictable, where it's like 9 times out of 10 I figure out what's going on before the end of the book, and I don't think I'm a magic person. I just think that they're just way too predictable. So that's a huge issue that I have with thrillers. If you go to a Barnes & Noble and you look at the horror section or the science fiction section, and then you look at the thriller section, it's like double, triple, quadruple the size. So maybe there's just too much to choose from, paradox of choice, and I haven't found the right ones for me. So please leave your favorite thrillers down below, please. But anyways, I say that because I think that's going to play into the books that I think are over and underrated, and we'll get to that, you know, when we get to them. But let's just jump in. Let's start with my underrated books. Let's make people mad and start with this one. Okay, so this is Riley Sager's The Only One Left. Now, if you guys have been watching my channel, you know that this is the year of Riley Sager for me. I picked up his first book maybe a few months ago, and I think this is my 4th book that I've read from him. So I've enjoyed all of his works up until this one, and it's not that I didn't enjoy this one, but I do think it's overhyped, especially because I think that it has the highest ratings of his books on Goodreads, and I'm like, how? I'm very confused by it. This is about a girl who is a caretaker. She goes to take care of, well, her assignment is to take care of an older woman who, when she was younger, in like the 20s, it is said that she killed her parents and her sister, but the cops couldn't prove anything, so she went on living in her house all these years. No one's seen her, and so this caretaker goes to take care of her. But when she arrives, the old woman says, I want to tell you everything that happened. A great premise, right? Like, that sounds fantastic. And it's not that it was poorly written, it's not that it wasn't entertaining, it's just that this book, have you guys seen the movie Wild Things from the 90s? Do you know how every other scene there was a new twist, and you were just like, Jesus, can we relax on the twist? That's how I felt in this book. Like, there's no way to predict it, which I think is good, but 2, I also do think that there's such a thing as too many twists in a book, and some of them I did find pretty unbelievable, just for me personally. Now, I do think that it's interesting, and I do think that there were literary devices used to parallel things, and like, I'll get more into this book in my review at the end of the month, so stay tuned for that, and I'll give you like all of the ins and outs, and I took notes on it because I have a lot to say about this one. But I think this book is overhyped. That's crazy that people think that this is the best Riley Sager book. That is wild to me. So anyways, again, it's not because I don't like the author, it's not because it wasn't well written, but he has better books than this. In my, you know, in my opinion, just for me, personally, just for me. Not my favorite book. Still entertaining, still glad that I read it, but not for me. Okay, the next one I have here is The Couple Next Door. This is by Sherry Lapina, and this is about a couple. They decide to go to a dinner party next door at their neighbor's house, and they have a young baby. The baby gets abducted while they are next door, and so the whole thing, you're trying to figure out what happened to this baby. My issue with this book were two things. One, it's written in present tense. So this can be a very powerful tool in writing, especially in mysteries where you're trying to uncover things as the reader, as the characters in the story uncover them. There is a time and a place for using present tense, and it can be extremely effective. However, when you're talking about emotion, it just seems like when you're writing in present tense, a lot of that emotion gets left out and you feel almost a little bit removed for the story, which again can work, especially in a mystery setting where you can't know everything about the characters. But in a story like this, where the mother's baby is taken from her, like, I want to feel that pain. And so I think that the present tense almost did a disservice to the reader by not allowing them to fully engage with the characters. That was one issue I had with this. And my second issue with this was that the plot seemed so unbelievably unrealistic to me, and not that it could never happen, but it just made me irritated. Like, I just didn't even care at the end. It just wasn't my type of story. And I'm curious if you guys enjoy this one, because it was a New York Times bestseller, so a lot of people read that guy. The next one that's on my list, this one's a little painful to say. This is Supermarket by Logic, by the rapper Logic. I'm a huge Logic fan, by the way, which is why I picked this up. In fact, I did an entire video where I read celebrity books. They were more thriller, sci-fi-y type books. Like, I read a book by Hilary Duff. I read a book by some Kardashians. I can't remember exactly. I'll leave that video linked down below. It was quite interesting. But anyways, this was part of that video that I did. So I read this one and I was thinking, you know, he's such a great writer and he has such great one-liners. I was really expecting the story to be really, really great, and I was pretty disappointed by this one. I can't exactly remember all of my issues with it, so you'll have to watch that video if you want like the full analysis of this book. But I think it just felt very, like, especially the dialogue felt very stilted. As somebody was talking, he was literally typing ha 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 instead of like, oh, so-and-so laughed. It just felt very unnatural. I think there were some issues where things just weren't researched well enough, and I know that Logic is like really big on mental health and things like that, and so just being somebody who's an advocate for that, I felt like it kind of did a disservice to some issues that were mentioned in the book. At the end, his little acknowledgements, he talked about how his friend told him he couldn't write a book, and so he was like, watch me, and so he wrote a book. And I mean, that's the motivation. I think that's all over Logic's message that he's delivering to people, right? Is like, you can do anything you want, and I think that that's really cool. But I did have a lot of issues with this book. Oh, one thing I did like about it though, he didn't have a ghostwriter. He wrote it himself. So like, kudos to him, you know, not being an author, not really even being a reader, and then writing a book. I think that's fantastic. Okay, there's one more guy that I have to mention. It's called A Flicker in the Dark by Stacy Willingham. And this was one that I just listened to on Audible. I accidentally used my husband's credit card and paid for a whole bunch of months of Audible without even realizing it. And so I had to buy a bunch of books, and so I was like, I'll just buy a bunch of thrillers because they're books that I probably wouldn't purchase anyways, and because my husband paid for them, technically they're free. You know what I'm saying. Anyways, that one, the concept, so cool. It's about a girl. When she was younger, her father killed a bunch of people, a bunch of girls over the summer. He got sent to jail, and now I think it's like 20 years later, on the 20-year anniversary, it's happening again. So they're trying to figure out if it's a copycat, if he wasn't the person that did it, blah blah blah. Really great concept, really interesting. However, I think my issue with this one was it was so unbelievably obvious. There could only possibly be one outcome to this story, in my opinion. I felt like the red herring was a little silly, and I felt like the main character was such a dummerson that I just couldn't get into the story. She's just like going into this killer's lair and she's like, oh, I forgot my phone. It's like, that wouldn't happen, you know? Like, she just kept doing really silly things like that. She's an intelligent woman. She's like a psychologist or something. So I'm just curious if thriller readers can kind of look over that. Like, for the concept of the story, it was really cool. Yeah, just a lot of weird decisions I feel like were made in that book. But anyways, those are my underrated books. Let's get into my favorite section, the overrated books, because I have a lot to share with you. Let's start with this guy, The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager. A lot of the authors that were in the underrated are also in the overrated, or vice versa. You get what I'm saying. So this book surprised the crap out of me. I did not know how it was gonna go. It's about a girl who, at a summer camp when she was little, her bunkmates disappeared. Just one night, just disappeared. And so she goes on to become a pretty successful painter, where she paints the girls in Lost in the Woods, as, you know, that's her claim to fame. Anyway, she gets invited back to the camp to kind of have some closure, I guess, and she starts finding clues that had been left there 20 years prior by the girls that had gone missing. And I thought this book was fantastic. I was so blown away by this. It really did shock me, a lot of the things. I thought it was super engaging, super interesting. I had a blast with this. I also really enjoy Riley Sager's female characters. I think he does such a great job of encapsulating a lot of feelings, emotions, and situations that young women and older women go through as well. And I also think that's a reason that I didn't connect well with the other book that I mentioned earlier, is because that one is kind of like everyone's keeping secrets, so you're a little bit removed from the characters. Whereas with his other books that I've read, you're very connected to his female characters. At least I have been. I loved that book. That's probably one of my favorite thriller books ever. Another one that I really enjoyed, I often put this in the horror section, but it is actually a thriller book. It's The Whisper Man by Alex North. This book was so absolutely fun. It's about a... Sorry, my husband's gonna be coming in the door in a second. It's about a man who has a kid, and the kid starts acting creepy, and there's a killer that's going around and whispering to kids, and they hear him whispering to them outside their windows before they get abducted. And then there's also a man in jail who had previously killed people, and then there's a cop. There's like a whole bunch of working themes throughout this book, but it is such a fun read, and I think super underrated. I don't hear a lot of people talking about that one. Next up is this guy, The Overnight Guest by Heather Gudenkoff. This book was, again, one of those that it really surprised me. It kept me engaged the whole time. I thought the premise was really cool. It's about a family that gets murdered, and then there's a woman that comes to the town to stay in the town because she's writing like a book about what happened in the murders, and then she finds a young boy outside of her house in the middle of a snowstorm, and so she has to try to figure out what's going on with this young boy. And so it's really cool because it goes from like the dead of summer to a snowstorm in winter. It's really interesting, the juxtaposition. I thought that it was written really well. I was super engaged the whole time. I thought it was creepy, and it really did surprise me. So this is another one that I think is super underrated. Another one is Local Missing Woman by Mary Kubica. Now, I understand why people don't like this book, and this is kind of where the beginning of the video comes into play here. The reason I think I enjoyed this book so much was because I just didn't see what happened. I didn't see it coming. And so the fact that this one surprised me so much was a reason I liked it. Some people don't like what ends up happening, and they feel like it's like unbelievable and whatever. You know, I can understand why people don't like this book, but I, however, did. It's about a... Oh, it's called Local Woman Missing. Did I say that, or did I say Local Missing Woman? I don't know. It's about a few people that go missing, and the community is trying to figure out what happened. Sorry, it's been a while since I've read this one. Oh yes, and then 11 years later, the young girl that has gone missing shockingly returns, and so people are trying to figure out what happened to her, where she's been, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, that book, it surprised me. It kept me super engaged. I kind of couldn't put that one down. The last one is Sherry Lupina's An Unwanted Guest. Now this one, I didn't enjoy The Couple Next Door, but I really enjoyed this one. This one I think was also written in present tense, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, so this one's written in present tense. However, it's about a group of people that are staying in a hotel during a snowstorm, and they lose electricity, they can't leave, and people start getting knocked off one by one. It's like your basic whodunit book. So in this sense, I like the present tense being used because you're uncovering things as they're uncovering things. You can't get close to any of the characters because like everyone's a suspect sort of thing. It worked in this book, and this was a fantastic read, and I liked that one a lot more than the other. Now let's talk about books that I think are appropriately obsessed about. I'm just gonna go through these really quick. Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. I've seen this book everywhere. So many people love it, and I know why. This book is absolutely fantastic. I would say it's more of a science fiction book, but it's in the thriller section, so I don't know. But anyways, it's about a man. He's trying to not feel bad about the fact that he chose having a family over his career, but he often wonders what it would have been like had he chosen his career. And he gets abducted, taken away from his family, and it's like his fight to get back to them. And it seems like a traditional story, but I promise, well, I can't promise, I don't know what books you've read. I've personally never read anything like this. This was so fun. There's adventure in here, thriller, sci-fi. You got a little bit of everything, even a little bit of horror, I would say, a little bit of blood, but it's such a great book. It really does just make you think, and I've never read anything like it. It was another one that I could not put down. If you haven't read this book yet, highly recommend, especially if you guys like more sci-fi stuff. Another book that I think is appropriately hyped is The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins. Loved the crap out of this book. This has been made into a movie, I want to say twice, but maybe it was just once. It's about a girl. She gets divorced from her husband, but every day on the train stops where she used to live with her husband, like where her old house is, and he lives there with his new wife and her daughter and their daughter. And so she stops and has to like look at what she doesn't have. She has some issues with drinking. Then she comes to find out that on that same street, a girl had gone missing, but as the train stops, she's seen that girl, you know, a lot. And so she kind of interjects herself into the investigation of finding out what happened to that girl. And she's not necessarily an unreliable narrator to the reader, but she's definitely an unreliable character to other characters in the story because of her past, because of her drinking problem. It's just a fun read. I loved this book. I had such a blast reading that. And the last one that I want to say is Gone Girl. I think that's by Gillian Flynn, and I think that one is appropriately hyped. They made a movie about it. It was a fun movie, and I know this one was written a while ago, but I think it was one of those movies that you just at that time hadn't read anything else like it before, and I felt like it was enjoyable. I felt like it was a fun read. You just went along with the characters and you were surprised at some of the stuff that happened. It's about a girl that goes missing and the husband's kind of suspected, and then layers get peeled back and you slowly reveal the secrets people were hiding and like what's actually going on. I thought that it was a really fun book. So there you have it. Those are my thriller books that I think are overhyped, underhyped, and appropriately hyped. I hope this video was entertaining. Please feel free to leave your list down below or talk about any of these books. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon with another horror video. Bye guys.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.